Okay, we are an Ayin Vav Amud Beis, Yoma 76b. Yes, and actually the verse we quoted yesterday, I was thinking that as I was learning the Chumash yesterday, the verse we quoted comes from right there. The verse we quoted where they said that all we have is this manna, and the complaint was that the food absorbs completely into their body, and they said, how could a human being do such a thing? That is in Rashi in yesterday's Chumash. As I was learning it, I was thinking that. That's right. Okay, so yesterday we had a discussion on how to define consumption of beverages, and it was important because there are 5 times when the Torah says to inflict pain upon yourself, to deny yourself in Yom Kippur, which means only 5 items of self-denial in Yom Kippur, 5 things you cannot do on Yom Kippur. But the Mishnah listed 6. And the way we got to 5 is by saying that food and drink are 1. The prohibition against eating and drinking are 1. And we define, therefore, achila not as eating, but as consumption. We have to find a verse which used the term achal in the context of consuming a beverage. And we did that. We proved that because it says yayin v'sheichar, not to eat, not to achal, to eat both wine and sheichar. And sheichar is definitely a liquid, right? Because we compared it to the nazir where it says not to drink sheichar, and that's talking about an alcoholic beverage. And therefore we understood that sheichar means a beverage, clearly, for sure. Unlike yayin, unlike wine, which could be consumed through eating, sheichar has to be considered a drink. And the verse says elsewhere, with respect to the tithe you're taking to Jerusalem, that you will eat your sheichar, you shall achal, you shall eat. Thus proving that the word achal can be translated not just to eat, but also to consume, and therefore would also include beverages. That's where we were. But in the context of that discussion, we raised a verse which had the word tirosh in it. It was the first verse that we suggested to prove the idea that there is something called, that the word achila includes drinking, was from a verse that said tirosh. And the Gemara asserted that tirosh means wine. The Gemara is going to challenge that premise, the definition of the word tirosh and what it actually means. So first the Gemara is going to go through that. This word tirosh and whether it means wine or not, or what else could it mean? Bring verses and supporting texts for one way or the other. And then the Gemara is going to get into why at all wine is called tirosh and yayin. And that's going to get into a discussion about whether or not getting intoxicated from wine is a good thing or a bad thing. It's a very, very interesting discussion. So that's where we're going today. So we are on Ayin Vav Amud Beis, it's 76b, and it is second line from the top, third to last word. The Gemara says, V'tirosh, is it true that tirosh chamrahu is wine? Is that the case? We'll bring you a text which proves the other way, that tirosh is not wine. Tanya, but we've been taught in the Mishnah age text, Hanoider min tirosh, one who vows, I will not consume tirosh. So he uses the term tirosh. So what is he allowed to eat and what's not allowed to eat? That would give us a clear definition of what the word tirosh means. So says this Mishnah age text, Aser b'chol mini matika, he's forbidden to eat anything sweet, like apples and grapes, but it includes as well the juice that comes out of it. The juice is sweet, so it's fruit juice, right? But mutter, it's permissible, b'yayin, it's permissible to drink wine. So if a person says, I'm not going to consume tirosh as a vow, he's not allowed to have fruit juice, including grape juice, but may have wine. Wine is defined, as Rashi tells us, if it sat for at least 40 days to ferment. Before that, it's grape juice. After that, it's wine. Which therefore would imply that the word tirosh does not mean wine itself, but it's more related to the grape. And the juice that comes out of the grape maybe, but it's more the grape than it is the wine itself. But then the Gemara counters the other way. But v'lav chamrahu, are you telling me it's not wine? V'haksiv, I have a verse which implies that it is wine. The verse reads like this: V'tirosh yenoviv psulos. Literally, this means the tirosh will loosen, open up the psula, the young maiden, or a young maiden who hasn't known the company of man. Put it in nice terms. So what this really means is, there's different ways of understanding what this means, but the way Rashi explains it is that tirosh will, bring the person to a place of intoxication where he will reveal secrets that are ordinarily closed up, like this young woman. That's the way Rashi understands it. There's another reading of it, which is wine is such that it will even loosen such a girl who's usually prudent. Either way, the point is that tirosh in this verse is a reference to intoxicating substance that loosens the person. So this verse seems to imply tirosh means wine. So the Mishnah, which said that one who vows to not consume tirosh, implies that it only includes the grape itself, not the wine, because you're allowed to drink wine after a person vows from consuming tirosh. But here, this verse describes tirosh as an intoxicating substance. So which one is it? Is tirosh the grape, or is tirosh the wine? So says the Gemara. Sorry? But it's the same terminology used there, the same word tirosh. So you have to understand what the word tirosh means. So the Gemara says like this. The halacha with respect to the vow, someone who vows and says, I will not consume tirosh, whatever halachic definition you give there has to be precise. When it comes to the verse, you can say it's in context. Or what the verse really means is this. But when you're vowing, I'm not going to consume tirosh, and the law accordingly is you're allowed to drink wine, then tirosh cannot include wine. And therefore the Gemara says like this. The verse has to be put in context and should be read as follows. Davar haba min tirosh never psulos. Not that tirosh itself loosens the young maiden, or is intoxicating that loosens the secrets like a young maiden. But rather, something which comes from tirosh does that. So tirosh is the grape. So in other words, it's a poetic way of saying, imagine you said, the grape produces intoxicating figures. So you use the term grape, but you don't mean the grape itself. You mean that which comes from the grape. And therefore, when the verse says that tirosh has a substance that's able to loosen and reveal secrets, it doesn't necessarily mean the tirosh, the grape itself, but it means that which comes from the grape, that which comes from the tirosh. So we can still maintain that tirosh means grape rather than wine. And when the verse says tirosh has an intoxicating element, it doesn't mean the grape itself, it means that which comes from the grape. That's the Gemara says at the moment. And now the Gemara gives another verse, which says like this. But the verse reads, get the exact translation. It is, the tirosh yikavecha yefroitzu. Tirosh expands, right? I think that's what it is. 1 minute. Yeah, not expands, overflows. The tirosh overflows your vats. That's what yikavecha means. Yikavecha means your vat. So yikavcha, your yikav, is a reference to that which is a vat, which is used to make it into wine. So if the verse says, your tirosh shall overflow your yekev, your vat, it cannot be talking about grapes, and it cannot be talking about grape juice either. It's got to be talking about wine. That's the only thing that goes into the vat, the only thing that goes into the yekev. So that's one verse. That which comes from the grape. And that's the Gemara answers. That which comes from the tirosh will overflow in your vat. Again, not the grape itself, but that which comes from the grape. So at this point, we're still with the view that tirosh itself means the grape. And all these verses that say the tirosh has an alcohol effect, either because it says it overflows your vat, or it says because it loosens and makes you reveal secrets. It's talking about the byproduct of tirosh, not tirosh itself. And now the Gemara brings a verse that conclusively must mean that tirosh is wine. What's the verse? The verse reads this. But the verse reads, quote, zinus, promiscuity, yayin and wine, tirosh and tirosh, yikach lev takes one's heart. Which means these are the things, tirosh, wine, and promiscuity, that make someone misbehave. This couldn't be the grape itself or that which flows from the grape, because you just said before yayin, you just said before wine. Right? In other words, you're adding another terminology here. Znus, yayin, and tirosh. To say in this verse that tirosh here means that which comes from the tirosh is a bit of a stretch, considering you just said wine. So tirosh must be another description of that thing. So at this point, the Gemara concedes that tirosh must be wine, therefore, because of this verse, describing wine on the level of promiscuity that takes one's heart. And therefore the Gemara concludes, therefore we must say that everybody agrees, tirosh chamrahu, that the word tirosh in its proper usage, in the biblical usage, does mean wine. Now the question becomes with the law of the vow. A person took a vow and said, I will not consume tirosh. The halacha was, he's allowed to drink wine, he's just not allowed to have grapes or grape juice. So how do we reconcile that? Seemingly tirosh means wine. If the guy vowed against taking tirosh, he should not be allowed to drink wine. Fair question? The Gemara therefore says, when it comes to nedarim, halach achar lashon b'nei adam. Even though you have to use the common tongue, not the precise wording, but the common tongue. Now, when a person takes a vow, it's not a question of linguistics. It's a question of what's his intention. When the verse uses a word, every word in the Torah is precise. So the Torah uses the word tirosh, it means tirosh, and therefore that means wine. But when a person takes a vow, the terminology is not a question of what's the technical, Webster dictionary meaning. The question is, what did he mean when he said it? And the Gemara posits that people do not refer to wine as tirosh in common language. Common language, you refer to wine as yayin. And therefore, if you said tirosh, you meant something else. Even though what you meant is different than the technical legal term. Following? And therefore, in other words, there's a question of common expression versus the linguistics. So from a technical linguistic perspective, tirosh means wine. And therefore, when the verse says tirosh, it means wine. But in common expression, when people want to say wine, they just use the word yayin. So if this person said, I'm not going to drink yayin, we know he meant wine. The person says, I don't want to drink tirosh, but what did he mean? He didn't mean wine, because if he meant wine, he would have said yayin, because that's the common usage. Therefore, he must have meant something else. And therefore, the Mishnah says what he means is grapes, but not because the term tirosh actually means grape, but because that's the common usage. That's the Gemara, how the Gemara reconciles the term tirosh. Scripturally speaking, it means wine. Colloquially, it means something other than wine, because colloquially speaking, people use the word yayin to say wine. And therefore, it means something like that, either grape juice or grape itself. There's a grape juice that's called tirosh because of this verse, because of these verses. Okay, now the Gemara gets into why is it called wine, and why is it called yayin, and why is it called tirosh? And this gets into whether or not it's a good thing to even drink wine. This is a fantastic discussion here. So let's see. Why is the wine referred to by the word yayin? And why is it called tirosh? Names in Torah are very significant. A number of times in the Gemara we have this idea of what the name represents, especially when you learn Tanya, part 2, chapter 1, in Shara Yichud Vamuna. The Rebbe says that the Hebrew name, not the Hebrew name, the name in Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew people would think I mean modern Hebrew. I mean Lashon Kodesh means biblical Hebrew. The way in which something is referred to in biblical Hebrew, which is the holy tongue, it's God's language, that is those words are the means, are the vehicle to bring divine energy to keep that thing alive. So what keeps a stone in existence? The divine letters Aleph, Vez, Nun, Even, which is how you say stone in Lashon HaKodesh. These words keep those things alive. And if the letters and the words that something is referred to in God's language is what keeps it alive. Therefore, there's great significance because its life force comes from there. Right? The Gemara says that a mayor will be able to tell someone's personality by their name. Your name, son of your father's name, son of his father's name, and the name, your Hebrew name, is the channel for your neshama to come into your body, and therefore will tell him about your personality just by the name. So the name is very, very significant. And if the Gemara asks, why is wine called yayin and tirosh? Right? Most languages are what's called in Hebrew it's referred to as heskemi, which means it's consensus. We all agree that we're going to refer to this as table, and that's why it's called table. There's nothing significant about the letters T-A-B-L-E. Nothing significant. We all agree it's going to be called table, because if we didn't agree, we wouldn't be able to communicate. So all languages are just consensus, which is why languages evolve. As people adopt new words to describe things, they become incorporated into the language. But Lashon HaKodesh is not like that. Lashon HaKodesh is God's language. It's not Jews got together and said, let's call a stone an Evan. God gave it that word name. And that name is its source of life. And therefore, names in Lashon HaKodesh are very, very significant. As is seen throughout the Gemara analyzes the names of things. So the Gemara asks, therefore, Amai Karle Yayin, why is it called Yayin? Amai Karle Tirosh, and why is it called Tirosh? Two names for wine. Says the Gemara like this. Yayin, the name Yayin, wine, Shemevi Yalala La'olam. The word Yayin comes from the term Yalala, which means to complain or to say woe, to cry out. It brings woe onto the world. Wine brings destruction. It can bring destruction. And therefore it's called Yayin. So there's a negative connotation here. It's called Yayin because it has a negative component to it. It brings Yalala, it brings woe, it brings trouble. Likewise, Tirosh is called Tirosh. The word Tirosh can be divided into two. Tihi Rosh. You shall be a Rosh. What's that? Shekalam is Garabai. Anyone who is Garabai means to be proud of it. This is his identity, is his wine consumption. Naser Rosh becomes empty. It's vain. It's Rosh. Or poor, empty, void. So it's negative effect. It's called Yayin because it brings trouble to the world. And it's called Tirosh because it causes the person to become Rosh, causes him to become poor, maybe because he spent all of his money on alcohol, or it becomes empty, void. There's nothing left to him. He's just Nebach, an alcoholic. That's on one side. But there's going to be the flip side. Just like this, Rav Kana Rami. Rav Kana raised the seeming contradiction. Siv, the verse reads, Tirosh, describing the Tirosh, this wine, which is called Tirosh, is written Tirosh. So if you look at the words, the way it's written, it's Taf, Yud, Reish, Shin. So the Oi, Tirosh, there's no Vav there. There's no Chaylam. The Chaylam is just a dot on the left, right? You don't see it, but right, there's two ways you can make the Oi sound in Hebrew. Either there's a Vav, or there's just a dot in the top left of the corner of the word, right? Of the letter, I'm sorry. So here, Ksiv Tirosh, it's written Tirosh without that Chaylam, without the Oi. But the Kardinon, the way it's written, the way it's pronounced, is Tirosh. You pronounce it with that Vav, with the Roi. Right? So there's a dual meaning therefore here. There's Tirosh without the Vav, and then there's Tirosh with the Vav. What's the difference? Says the Gemara like this. Zacha, if the person merits, he's meritorious, then Naser Rosh, then the wine comes for him and makes him into a head. As the Rashi says it clears his heart and opens up his mind to learn more, to more wisdom. Loi Zacha, not meritorious, Naser Rosh, he becomes poor and empty. So now already we have the beginning here that wine and this intoxication in general is a tool. The question is how it's used. Person's meritorious, and the wine serves as a medium to open up his heart, open up his mind. And it's a plus, it's a good thing. But if it's not meritorious, it becomes empty and poor. So what does this mean, meritorious and not meritorious? What does that mean? So one could read it simply, it's a question of punishment. Right? If he's meritorious, he has enough merits, God will make the wine a blessing for him. If he's demeritorious, he's a bad person, God will punish him and make them wine into a curse and to make him empty. But I don't think that that's the correct reading. And on the side, I wonder if they're bringing it on this page here. No, they don't. But on the side of it here, the one that I'm looking at, they bring a Rashi in Sanhedrin, where Rashi comments on the same word. And Rashi says, meaning to say, if he's merit and he knows how to be careful not to take more than necessary. So the meritorious is not a question of punishment. Is he have enough mitzvahs and God's going to reward him, or he has sins and God's going to punish him? It's a question of his character. If he's a refined character, then the wine's going to be a fantastic tool. If he's not of a refined character, the wine's going to be destructive. And that's what we see. You see this in reality, especially anybody who's hanging around the Fabrengen enough. You see people who, there are some who drink alcohol and more secrets of Torah come out, and more love of their fellow Jew comes out, and they're more embracing. Other people drink alcohol and the opposite effect happens. I actually once read, well, first of all, I should say that because of this risk, the Rabbi actually banned excessive alcohol drinking in Chabad under 40 years old. Under 40 years old, not allowed to drink more than 4 lachaims in one Fabrengen. Not allowed to drink more than 4 lachaims in one Fabrengen. Under 40. Sorry? I'm sorry? Yeah, and that fork should only come to a revius, which is like a few ounces, not so much, of hard alcohol. You know, what individual Hasidim do with that instruction is a separate story, but this is the fact. The Rabbi made this ban. A number of times talked about it. That's the first thing I want to just look at disclaimer, just to understand. People talk about the Chabad and the Fabrengen and there's drinking. As far as the Rebbe is concerned, under 40, that should not happen. At least not excessively. That's the first thing. The other thing is when I was reading a transcript, the previous Rebbe is transcribing a mimer that he learned with his father. Excuse me. So the previous Rebbe is learning with his father, the Rebbe before him. So this is the 5th Chabad Rebbe learning with the 6th Chabad Rebbe as a child. And they're learning together a mimer from the Alter Rebbe in his commentary on the Siddur. And the previous Rebbe transcribes his father's comments. And his father goes on a little bit of a sidetrack about personality traits. And he gets into this thing about with Fabrengens, with drinking. And there he says that, over there he actually makes it, he doesn't quote this Gemara. I'm kind of transposing that commentary onto this Gemara. He doesn't say the word Zacha, not Zacha, but he talks about different people's personalities. And there's certain personalities that as they say L'chaim, they become more loving of their fellow Jew because they're softer people in general. They're softer people. And therefore when they say L'chaim, they remain soft and that softness gets accentuated. But then there are others, he says, who have a harsher personality. And if they are the type of people who, when they're sober, are capable of controlling that harsher personality. It takes a lot of inner strength to control that personality if they are such that are predisposed to being more harsh. But then when they drink l'chaim, and they can no longer contain themselves, they might end up doing things they would never do if they were sober. They would never do it. And the 5th Chabad Rebbe tells the son that there were chassidim in the old days who took pride in themselves, that no matter all their years of saying l'chaim and fabrengen, they never got to the point where they did something that they wouldn't do when they didn't say l'chaim. And that's perhaps the Gemara is saying here, based on that Rashi in Sanhedrin. The person has to know his personality, know what he's like, know what the effects are going to happen. That's number one, know his own personality. Number two is not just know his personality, but also know if he knows how to use the tool. It's a tool like any other. Like a knife. Is a knife dangerous or a knife not dangerous? It depends. Knife is a fantastic tool, but used it in the kitchen all the time. But if done the wrong way, put it in the wrong hands, and if you don't know how to use it, it's very dangerous. So a person has to know two things. Number one, his personality. Is he the kind of person that's going to become better or worse after saying l'chaim? Is he going to offend people, or is he going to express love to people? Is he going to share Torah, or is he going to share stupidity? The first question he has to know. And the other question is on his personal level, on the personality level. And number two is, even if he has a personality, which is going to express, love and not, God forbid, the opposite, he also has to know if he knows how to use the tool. He could be a very good guy, but if he doesn't know how to use the tool of saying l'chaim to share Torah and to share love of a fellow Jew, then he should probably stay away from it. That's kind of what the Gemara is saying here. Zacha, merit, or not zacha. Merit, it becomes a head, it opens his mind, opens his heart. Not zacha, it makes him empty, vain, poor, and it can have, God forbid, very negative consequences. And loss of friends, yes, God forbid. So on that note, the Gemara says the following. These are the concluding lines of this discussion. Behind the Rava, and this is similar to that which Rava said. The Rava raised a similar contradiction. Siv, the verse reads, Yishmach actually. It's written with a shin. Now Yishmach with a shin comes from the word sham, which means to be empty. Shmama, vain, empty. But Vakarinon is pronounced Yismach with a sin, which means joy. So Zacha, if the person merits Mesamach, Mesamchay. Wine makes him happy. Wine brings positivity. Loi Zacha, he doesn't merit. Meshamamai, it makes him empty, vain, sad, and lost. Again, a similar kind of idea. Behind the Amar Rava, and this is what Rava says: Chamra v'rechani, wine and good smell, pitchin, open up the mind, bring clever. Wine, and this is actually these three words: Chamra v'recha pitchin, that wine and good smell open up the mind, open up the heart, is quoted in Tanya. In Tanya, the Alter talks about most of our world, which is identified as klipat noga, a level of, it's not godly, the table isn't godly, and neither is the phone, for that matter, neither is a bottle of water, but it's not necessarily evil either. I could use it in a good way, potentially elevate it. So it's klipa at the moment, it's klipa, because at the moment it's not godly, but it's klipat noga. Noga means a ray. It has a ray of light. It has some hope. It's redeemable. And that's our mission, as explained by the Arizal, to engage in all of this physical stuff in the world and elevate it. In the language of the Arizal, it's elevating the sparks. In the language of Hasidus, it's bringing godliness into this world, make a home for him. But the point is to use the physical world around us in a manner that serves Hashem. So there he's explaining this idea. And there he goes through different examples, like eating and even making a joke, he said. Even making a joke. Right? The Gemara tells us that the Rabbi, before he would give a class, he would say a joke to get people in the good mood, and then he would teach. So that joke itself, is it a holy thing or not a holy thing? Well, jokes aren't holy necessarily. But here in the context of him making everybody in a good mood so that they can learn better, it got elevated to holiness because the joke was used to serve Hashem. Right? And there he says a similar thing with respect to eating and drinking. And he uses the example not just of eating, a person thinks, if I'm only eating for the sake of getting energy so I can serve Hashem later, so eat the minimum. You have to have the best steak? No. If all you need to do is survive so you can serve Hashem later, so eat bread and water and that's it. And there are sources for this. Right? The Mishnah says that a person should eat bread and salt. What's the terminology in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos? A person should eat, he should sit on the floor, eat bread and salt, and do Torah. In other words, minimizing your physical engagement. There is that track, and Torah talks about that. But then there's another track, which is like this here. Rava says, wine and smell are good or open the mind. A smell is not necessary. No one needs a smell to survive. It's beyond what you survive. It's enjoyment. And the same thing with wine. You don't need wine to survive per se. It's not like water where you have to drink it. It's something just enjoyable. But nonetheless, if used in the right way, it's a great tool to open up the mind. So in our engagement of the physical world, to elevate it, it's not just a question of minimal survival. If you're going to be eating, if you're the kind of person, let's put it this way, if you're the kind of person who's going to follow that Mishnah, which says to drink minimal water, eat bread and salt, and you're going to be miserable all day, then you defeated the purpose. The whole Mishnah there says you should eat wine, eat bread and drink a little bit of water and salt and sit on the floor and sit and study Torah. But here you're doing that, and now because you're so miserable, you can't study Torah. It's similar to today's Tanya. The Alter says that a person who wants to fast to do teshuvah, if the fasting is going to stop them from learning Torah, then what's the point of the fast? You ruin the purpose. The whole point of the fasting is because you want to do teshuvah and get closer to Hashem, and instead what are you doing? Lying on the couch miserable, watching, busy with your iPhone or your TV, because you want to get your mind off the fast. You see the whole purpose. The whole point of the fast is to bring you closer to Hashem. And here it is serving the other way around. So same thing, I think, sorry? That's in Kippur where the Torah says specifically to fast. But most fasts are a question of teshuvah. Okay, again, if you're talking about the fasts that are halachic fasts, before you decide to break it, speak to a rabbi. Here we're talking about fast that a person takes upon himself for teshuvah. So it's a voluntary fast. So the Alter Rebbe says, if that's going to stop you from learning Torah, then don't do that. He's quoting the Gemara. Right? So likewise, a person who goes with that Mishnah and says, I'm going to eat minimal bread, drink minimal water, sit on the floor, but I'm going to be miserable and not study Torah. They ruin the whole point. And therefore, if you're the kind of person like Rabbi says, you need a glass of wine to put you in a good mood, and good smell opens up your mind and puts you in a good mood. That's where the Alter Rebbe is quoting that line to say. So then do that, and that becomes in the service of Hashem. And the wine itself gets elevated, even though it's not necessary for my survival, but because it puts me in the frame of mind so that I can learn better, then do that. Don't be miserable. Be a happy, good person. Feed yourself properly. Feel good about how you eat. Feel good about how you drink. But at the same time, all of that feeling good about how you eat and drink is done with the purpose. I want to feel good so I can serve Hashem better later. And the same thing is true going back to the issue of alcohol, not just drinking a glass of wine, but to the point of intoxication. It's a question of, do we know how to use it? Do we not know how to use it? What kind of personalities we have? Are we the meritorious kind of personalities? Are we the personalities that are challenged with self-control? If that's my personality, then I shouldn't compromise that, God forbid, by drinking alcohol. I'll conclude, this explains why the Shalah writes. The famous Shalah writes that many times tzaddikim would drink just for the sole purpose that they can reveal Torah. You know, just like something that's very intimately connected to you. You don't want to reveal unless when someone drinks, then you know, we quoted it before, loosens the young maiden. Right? But for a lot of us, you know, Torah is not something that's so intimate that we don't want to share it. We share Torah. But for a tzaddik whose relationship with Hashem is so deep, that deep levels of Torah are like, it's like intimacy he doesn't want to share. And when he says l'chaim, then he shares it. That's the way the Shalah almost writes it. That's right. So that's why a person has to know where he stands. If he's at this level where he's meritorious, he's like the Shalah. When he drinks alcohol, it's going to open up his mind and he's going to start sharing more Torah. Okay? Good for him. But if he's not that kind of person, then he doesn't know how to use the tool, he should not engage. Especially, as I said, if he's the kind of personality who's predisposed to being harsh, and when he's sober, he has to fight himself to control himself from speaking not nicely or doing things that are not nice. And certainly he shouldn't engage in this tool, turning the knife on himself rather than turning the knife on the food he's trying to eat, to use that metaphor of the knife being a good thing or a bad thing, considering it's just a tool. So this is the Gemara's take on saying l'chaim. Yeah. Okay, wonderful day, buddy. A good Ner Shabbos.